Good evening, my dear students. I hope you all are fine. You all are studying hard. I can see that Dhyanesh, Dipanshu, Aman have already joined. So, very good evening to all my dear students. So, students, till today you have, like before this session, with respect to auditing and assurance subject, you have done chapter number 1 and 2. I hope that both these chapters, the concept of chapter number 1 and 2 are clear to you. And in case of any doubt, if it is still left, you know, then you can always send in your queries. Your queries will be always answered. Okay? So any of the doubts relating to the earlier chapters will be surely answered. I can see Jyoti, Chakshu, GR, Gomati, Jalaj, Shah, Alok, Sankaran, Rohit, everyone has joined. Pranav, Gaurav, Yatiraj, Vasudeva. So, students, today we will be starting with chapter number 3, which is audit documentation and audit evidence. A very, very important chapter consisting of 9 essays, right? So, let us start with this chapter. But before starting with the concepts given in this chapter, let us just try to understand the name of this chapter, which is audit documentation and audit evidence, right? Audit documentation and audit evidence. So basically, I want to tell you as to why we are studying this chapter in such a detail. I told you 9 essays are there in this chapter, Hana. Audit documentation and audit evidence. So let us first try to understand what audit is. You all have done this in detail in your chapter number 1, whereby we have studied that audit is an independent examination of financial information of any entity, whether profit oriented or not, irrespective of its size and legal form, where such an examination is conducted with a view to expressing an opinion thereon. Right? This we have covered much in detail in chapter number 1. So I'm not repeating it here. Now, quickly tell me what comes to your mind when I ask you about documentation. Any synonym or meaning of documentation, term documentation. So we have understood what is meant by audit. Now tell me what is meant by the term documentation. Quickly, I'm waiting for your replies. So when documentation is discussed, the first thing that comes to my mind is a record kind of thing, a record of something. Okay? So students, if you look at the dictionary meaning of term documentation, the dictionary meaning says that documentation means material that provides official information. Material that provides official information. So if we club audit and documentation together, so we can say the material that provides official information relating to what? Audit of financial statements. Okay? So this is what just the dictionary meaning. Okay? Now, if the auditor has to give an opinion, see what is the ultimate objective which we have done in terms of essay 200 in chapter number 1 is to express an opinion thereon. So it will not happen that the auditor will conduct the audit. Orally, he will remember what he has done and then he'll give his opinion, right? Because if after, let's say, 1 year or 2 years, he's been asked by someone that, okay, tell us, how do you arrive at this opinion? So, auditor must maintain certain documentation, certain material that will provide him the relevant information as to how the audit was conducted. Okay? So, abhi we have just understood, try to understand documentation in a very layman language. And I can see Suman has written record. Then Harshita is saying in writing. Dhyanesh, Murtaza, Rinuja are saying record, which is absolutely correct, right? Now tell me, if I ask you evidence, what comes to your mind about evidence? Evidence, term evidence. So the synonym that may come to your mind is what? Proof, right? And the dictionary meaning says the facts or signs that make you believe that something is true. Okay? So when the auditor is giving an opinion, which is the overall objective of the audit of the independent of audit of the financial statements, when he is giving an opinion, his opinion should be based on certain proof. He cannot just say like that the financial statement reflect a true and fair view, or they do not reflect a true and fair view. See, auditor is giving an expert opinion. It must be backed by certain audit evidence. Proof is required everywhere when you are giving some opinion, right? So evidence is what? Proof. Now, will the auditor remember all the proof in his mind? No. He will again document it. He will again maintain a record of the audit evidence that he collects throughout the process of audit, based on which he is giving an opinion. Okay? Now, since audit documentation and audit evidence plays a very important role in the audit of the financial statement, right? So there are SA, standards on auditing, right, which prescribes as to how all the auditors across the country will maintain audit documentation, or it contains the various provisions with respect to audit documentation, or the audit evidence. So we'll be discussing all these 9 essays. Okay? Okay? So I hope the basic meaning of audit documentation and audit evidence is clear to all of you. And students, essay 230 is related to what? And the name is what? Audit documentation. This we'll be doing today. Then we'll also try to start today essay 500, which is what? Audit evidence. And all the further essays of the 500 series are basically related to one or the other way to collect audit evidence, right? So we'll be doing rest 7 essays in the sessions to come. Okay? So I hope what we are doing in this chapter, what is basic meaning of audit documentation and audit evidence, I hope it is clear to all of you. Okay? Now, let us try to understand audit documentation. Okay? So, if I tell you that if you become an auditor, just keep in your mind that whatever work you have done throughout the conduct of audit, you need to maintain a record of that work, right? And based on that work, whatever audit evidence you draw, again, auditor, you need to maintain a record of that audit evidence. Further, based on that audit evidence, whatever conclusions you are going to draw with respect to the particular item of the financial statement, you as an auditor, you need to maintain a record of all those conclusions. So whatever activities, audit activities, that is audit procedures which will be performed, whatever relevant audit evidence which will be obtained, and the conclusions the auditor is going to reach throughout the process of audit, when a record of all such thing is maintained, that is called what? Audit documentation. Okay? So first, let us try to understand this with the help of an example. So let's say the auditor is checking what? Debtors. The auditor is checking the debtors balance that is appearing in the books of his client. Okay? Now he performs various procedures, like he checks the ledgers. He calls for external confirmation from the debtors. What is external confirmation? We will be doing this in detail in essay 505, but as of now, try to understand external confirmation. When the auditor is confirming from the debtors, that debtors tell me what is the balance of my client in your books of account. He's confirming it external from the third party, from the external party. Okay? So what are all these? In order to check the debtor balance, our auditor, he has performed various procedures, like he has checked the ledgers. he has asked for what? External confirmation from the client. So what are these? These are audit procedures that the auditor performs. Okay. Now, in response to, let's say, this external confirmation, he receives the answer. He receives the confirmation letter from the debtor. So, based on that, he concludes that the debtor's figure are reflected appropriately in the books of accounts. So, I can say these are the audit procedures that the auditor performed when he's checking the debtor balance. The confirmation letter that he received from the third party, or let's say if he did various calculations with respect to provisions for bad and doubtful debts and other things, all that will become what? Audit evidence. Based on the above, he concluded that the debtors are being appropriately, they are duly reflected in the books of accounts of his client. A record of all these things will become what? Audit documentation. Okay. So I can say audit documentation is a record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and the conclusions the auditor reached. So when auditor maintains a record of each and every audit procedure that he performed during the conduct of audit, each and every audit evidence that he obtained during the conduct of audit, and each and every conclusion that he reached about in his conducting his audit of financial statement, a record of all that is what? Audit documentation. And where is this definition given? SA 230. And I told you what is the name? As simple as audit documentation. SA 230. These audit documentation, these are also known as working papers or work papers of auditor. है ना, वर्किंग पेपर्स ही तो है ना ऑडिटर के, कि ये सब ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स किए, ये सब ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन किया, ये सब कंक्लूजन्स ड्रॉ किए. सो व्हाट आर दीज? वर्किंग पेपर्स और द work papers of the auditor, right? Now, students, as we have seen in chapter number 1 also, I told you that every essay contains some responsibility for the auditor. So SA 230, the name of which is what? Audit documentation. It contains the responsibility of the auditor to prepare audit documentation for an audit of financial statement. It simply says that it has responsibilities, auditors' responsibilities to prepare audit documentation for an audit of financial statement. So it is not as such saying that for planning an audit of financial statement, for performing an audit, or with respect to materiality. It is saying for an audit of financial statement. So throughout the conduct of audit, whatever work the auditor is going to perform, whatever audit evidence he is going to obtain, and whatever conclusions he is going to draw, throughout the conduct of audit, the auditor needs to maintain what? Audit documentation, right? Now, students, if you remember, you all have done in chapter number 2, materiality, SA 320, materiality in planning and performing an audit. You all have done SA 300 relating to planning and audit. And students, if you remember, in those particular essays also, there is a small paragraph relating to what? Documentation requirement. So let's say, take an example of SA 320, materiality in planning and performing an audit. So there it says that the auditor needs to maintain the documentation with respect to materiality level, with respect to performance materiality, with respect to revision of materiality level. Remember, right? So SA 230 says that if there are any specific requirements in particular essays, that will not limit the auditor's responsibility with respect to SA 230. So if SA 230 is saying that throughout the conduct of audit documentation is to be made, it is to be maintained. Auditor cannot say that 320 to sirf materiality ke liye bolta hai, nahi. So SA 230 says it is the responsibility of the auditor to prepare audit documentation for an audit of financial statement, that is throughout the conduct of the audit. So let us have a look at the module till here. So SA 230 audit documentation, it deals with the auditor's responsibility to prepare audit documentation for an audit of financial statement, right? The specific documentation requirements of other SAs. I gave you example of SA 320 because this you have studied so far, Hana. Do not limit the application of this SA. So ऐसा नहीं है that 320 is saying that only with respect to materiality the documentation is to be maintained. So with respect to the other part of the audit, the documentation will not be maintained. No, right? Law or regulation may establish additional documentation requirements. Now, what is the definition? So these are known as what? Working papers or work papers. So record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and the conclusions the auditor reach is what? Audit documentation. Okay? Is it clear? Quickly send in your reply. Is it clear? Audit documentation. Very basic, but very important. Okay. Now, what do you want? If I ask you, what are the objectives of the auditor in terms of SA 230 with respect to audit documentation? See, each and every essay, you will see it has certain scope for the auditor. It has certain responsibilities for the auditor and it has certain objectives for the auditor. So in terms of SA 230, which is what? Audit documentation, the objective of the auditor is to prepare audit documentation. So first and foremost, the auditor is required to prepare audit documentation. Okay, now what? Why? Because that audit documentation is going to provide a sufficient and appropriate record of the basis of auditor report. So if someone asks the auditor, tell me what is the basis of your opinion that you have given, auditor can always show the audit documentation that, see, these are the audit procedures I performed, these are the audit evidence I obtained, and these are the conclusions I reached based on which I have given my audit report or the audit opinion. So the very first objective of the auditor in terms of SA 230 is to prepare the audit documentation, which provides a sufficient appropriate record of the basis of auditor's report. है ना? Auditor report का क्या basis है? यही तो है ना, that he performed certain procedures based on which he obtained certain audit evidence, based on which he drew certain conclusions, and based on which he gave his audit report. So sufficient appropriate record of basis of auditor report. And see, if someone asks the auditor, tell me whether you performed and planned the audit in accordance with SA. So auditor can always show the audit documentation. Na, कि देखो, audit documentation में I have done the way it is mentioned in the essays. So it also provides an evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays, legal and regulatory requirements. Simple hai na? So what is your objective? The first and foremost objective is what? To prepare audit documentation that provide two kinds of evidence. What? First is what? Record of basis of the auditor report and an evidence that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays and legal and regulatory requirements. देखो ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता ना that if after let's say 2 years auditor has been asked that whether with respect to your client A Limited whether you performed and planned the audit in accordance with essays, तो ऑडिटर ऐसे तो नहीं बोल सकता ना कि देखो हाँ मैंने ऐसा किया था, मेरे पास कोई प्रूफ तो नहीं है बट मैंने ऐसा किया था, मैंने इन्वेंट्री को ऐसे चेक किया था. Vis-a-vis a situation whereby auditor is having a record of each and everything, whereby what all audit procedures he performed, the audit evidence he obtained, and the conclusions, everything is recorded in a sufficient and appropriate manner. Right? Clear? Related to this is a topic that what is the nature of audit evidence? So very simple, I can say the nature of audit documentation is that of providing audit evidence with respect to above 2 points only. Nature is such that it provides audit evidence. Audit evidence with respect to what? That the audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays, legal and regulatory requirements. Further, that the auditor, it provides an evidence with respect to what? Auditor's basis for the conclusion. Simple है, same है, ठीक है. Nature of audit documentation is such that it provides what? Audit evidence with respect to these two things. Now, students, tell me, if I ask you what are the various benefits of audit documentation? See, when the audit team has to maintain, has to prepare audit documentation. See, first of all, students, such audit documentation, we will read further, that it can be in paper form and electronic form also. Soft copies में भी हो सकता है. ठीक है? Now tell me, when the audit, the engagement partner and his team, they are maintaining audit documentation, है ना? It is a time consuming job ना. आप सब कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट कर रहे हो, सीक्वेंस में डॉक्यूमेंट कर रहे हो, आप ऑडिट एविडेंस को भी क्या कंक्लूजन है सबको डॉक्यूमेंट कर रहे हो. टेल मी, व्हाट कैन बी द बेनिफिट्स ऑफ preparing such audit documentation, or the purpose of such audit documentation? Will the engagement team can the engagement team have certain benefits of preparing audit documentation? Quickly tell me. Yes, Rohit, absolutely correct. In case in future there is some fraud which came out with respect to the client for which we conducted the audit, so this audit documentation is a evidence that, see, the audit was conducted in accordance with essays. We performed the audit at the way it was required. This is absolutely correct, Rohit. Correct. So G.R. Kanak is saying that it becomes a format for the next year. So I can say it helps in the next year audit. Then Alok is saying it can be checked as to what is done and what is left. So I can say it helps in planning and performing the audit. Okay. So Dhyanesh is saying it helps for next year's audit as it is helpful in planning. Correct. 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 Okay. So what are the benefits? Very simple. See, it helps the engagement team. This is what engagement. Hana, you all are now very well versed with the concept of engagement team, audit engagement, engagement partner. Hana? So engagement team, that is the audit team. It helps them to plan and perform the audit. See, let's say if the team is having the audit documentation of the last year, Hana, their planning and performance of the audit with respect to this year is going to be what? It is going to help them in planning and performing the audit, right? Further, if the engagement partner has in front of his eyes a document whereby everything is mentioned, that whatever has been done so far, so it will help in direction, supervision, and review of the work which has been done so far, right? And students, whenever the audit procedures are performed, whenever any audit evidence is obtained, the team, they put their initials as to who has done that work. So it helps the engagement team to see who is accountable for a particular work. So agar debtors ka audit Mr. A ne kiya, who is one of the team members in the engagement team, then when he puts his initials, or when he mentions his name on the top that I have done this, so it helps to see as to whether he is accountable for that work or someone else, right? Further, it helps in retaining record of matters of continuing significance. Let's take an example. I'm conducting the audit of A Limited. I am the auditor of this company for 5 years. Okay? Now, students, let's say I have obtained memorandum of association, article of association, or the company is having certain license. All these copies I have obtained from the management of A Limited, and I put them in my audit documentation. Now, next year again, when I'm conducting the audit, so I can refer to those memorandum of association, article of association, or the license from my audit documentation of the last year. So helps in retaining record of matters of continuing significance. Clear? ठीक है. Then the next 2 points are related to what? Inspection. If you remember, we have done in chapter number 1 with respect to quality control within the firm. And we saw that the firm, audit firm, they needs to have policies and procedures with respect to checking the quality of the work of the engagement that has been done. Hana? So when the proper audit documentation is maintained, it helps in the conduct of quality control review and inspection as required by SQC 1. Further, it also helps in external inspection. When, let's say, the work of the audit firm is being checked externally, Hana, let's say any other audit firm is checking the work of this audit firm. Let's say the audit firm was XYZ and Associates, Hana, who conducted the audit of A Limited. So if internal inspection is being taking place within XYZ and Associates, so conduct of quality control review and inspection in terms of standard on quality control 1, right? And external inspection is, let's say, MNO and Associates have been appointed to conduct a review of the quality of the work done by another audit firm, which is what? XYZ and Associates. So it also helps in the external inspection of the work done by XYZ and Associates in our case. Hana? So these 3 points are relating to what? Engagement team. कि ये plan perform करने में help करता है, direct supervise review करने में help करता है, and accountable कौन है? It helps in that. Further, continuing significance के matters है. Many of you have written future audits, so this is related to that only. And the next 2 points are relating to what? Inspection, internal and external. I hope it is clear. Correct. Jyoti saying, ma'am, it is easy to explain the articles from the audit documentation. Absolutely correct. See, I told you, many of you are asking me to repeat this 4th point again. So let's say this year I started the audit of A Limited and I asked them to provide me with memorandum of association, article of association of the company. Then let's say there are certain rent agreements, Hana? Or let's say this company is a pharmaceutical company, so it has a license also, Hana? So all these documents, if I am the auditor next year also, so if it is better that if I refer to all these matters of continuing significance, which are relevant in the next year also, right? Or let's say if any of the matters, let's say related party transactions are there, Hana? Next year also the company is having related party with transactions with those related party only, Hana? So I can always refer to such matters which are of continuing significance, which are relevant in the next year audit also. Continuing significance is what? Relevant in the next year audit also. So I gave example of what? Memorandum hai, koi license hai, koi agreement hai. So I can always refer to all those documents which are of continuing significance. So whose doubt was it? Vidya, is it clear? Okay, clear? So students, so far we have covered what? Audit documentation क्या होता है? Simple है. Record of audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and the conclusions the auditor reached. Simple. Objective क्या है? To prepare audit documentation that provides what? Sufficient appropriate record of basis of audit report and evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays. And what are the benefits or the purpose that we have seen? Vidya, is it clear? Okay. Now, form, content, extent of audit documentation. Acha, where is everything mentioned that we are just discussing? So this is what? SA 230. And the name is what? Audit documentation. Okay. Now, form, content, and extent of audit documentation. See, students, as such, I cannot say that there is a standard format. कि इसी format में audit documentation रहेगा. Why? Because the audit procedures, the audit evidence, and the conclusions, जिसको मिला के क्या बनता है audit documentation, all these 3 things will vary from client to client. Clear, है ना? एकदम एग्जैक्ट कैसे हो सकता है ना कि यहाँ पर भी यही प्रोसीजर्स है, यहाँ पर भी यही ऑडिट एविडेंस है, एंड नेक्स्ट क्लाइंट में भी यही है. ठीक है. But there are certain requirements which are mentioned in essay 230 with respect to form, content and extent of audit documentation, है ना? पहले simple language में देखेंगे क्या बोलता है essay 230, then we will understand it from the module. ठीक है? Just a minute. So see, look at this area. So let's say X Limited is the client for whom the audit firm and the name of the audit firm is ABC and Associates. It is conducting the audit of what? X Limited, financial statements of X Limited. Okay. So CAA and his team, that is CAA is the engagement partner with respect to audit of X Limited. Now, what should be the form, content, and extent of the audit documentation that CAA and his team are going to maintain for the audit of financial statements of X Limited? So it says that whatever audit documentation CAA and his team is going to maintain, it should be such that any experienced auditor, let's say MNO and Associates. So MNO and Associates are what? Experienced auditors having no previous connection with audit. See, experienced to hai MNO Limited, but they do not have any previous connection with X Limited. Hana? They are a firm of chartered accountants. So they are what? Experienced auditors. Hana? But they are not having any previous connection. They are not having any previous connection with what? X Limited. Okay? So SC 230 says that listen CAA and your team. When you are conducting the audit of X Limited, you should maintain the audit documentation in such a way that MNO and Associates, who are what? Experienced auditor. That is, they know how audit is conducted. They have an experience of audit. Though they are not related with the audit of X Limited, after going through the audit documentation that you have maintained, they should be able to understand what audit procedures you performed. They should be able to understand what audit evidence you obtained. And they should be able to understand that what significant judgments you made. What are the significant matters while you were conducting the audit. है ना? तो essay 230 में ये कंटेंट है. तो क्या कहा गया? With respect to form, content and extent of audit documentation, that it should be prepared in such a way that any experienced auditor, जिसको audit कैसे होता है, audit procedures क्या होते हैं, audit evidence कैसे लेते हैं, ये सब पता है. Experienced auditor, though not having any previous connection with the audit, जिसका X Limited से, in our case, he is not related to that, but after going through that audit documentation which has been maintained by CAA and his team, he should be able to, the MNO and Associates should be able to understand what audit procedures were performed, what audit evidence were obtained, and what significant matters were there when CAA and his team were conducting the audit of X Limited. ठीक है, अभी हमने डिटेल में कुछ भी डिस्कस नहीं किया, बस एक सिंपल सा अंडरस्टैंड किया. सो फॉर्म, कंटेंट एंड एक्सटेंट, है ना? क्या फॉर्म रहेगा, कंटेंट क्या रहेगा, एंड किस एक्सटेंट तक यू आर गोइंग टू मेंटेन द ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन, है ना? अगर डेप्रिसिएशन स्केड्यूल है ना, तो उसका किस एक्सटेंट तक ऑल द वर्किंग्स विल बी केप्ट इन द फाइल, है ना? What is the extent of such audit documentation, है ना? Let's say, देखो फॉर्म तो समझ आता है ना, क्या फॉर्म होगा, आपको कैसे मेंटेन करना है. कंटेंट, what all will be there. Extent of audit documentation, let's say if you have sent some mail to a client, to the third party, let's say debtor of the client, Hana. Then again you have sent a mail with asking for some balance confirmation, then again. So what is the extent of audit documentation? कितना प्रिंट आउट निकाल कर या कितना आपको उसमें अपने फाइल में उसको मेंटेन करना है, ठीक है. So the form, content and extent of audit documentation should be such that it should enable and experienced auditor, MNO and associates in our case, having no previous connection with the audit, that is audit of X Limited in our case, to understand the nature, the timing and the extent of audit procedures performed. Now, what is NTE, nature, timing, extent of audit procedures, that I'll discuss in detail later on. So, abhi try to understand that an experienced auditor who is not having the previous connection with the audit, he should be able to understand what audit procedures were performed. पढ़कर समझ आना चाहिए कि अच्छा ये audit procedures किए थे, external confirmation मंगवाया था, अच्छा inquiry किया था management से, अच्छा written representation लिया था management से, है ना. तो पढ़कर समझ आना चाहिए. Further, who performed the audit and the date, who performed the audit and the date when it was performed. Okay, just a minute. Okay, just a minute. Let us do this from the module. So we were doing what? Form content. So the auditor shall prepare audit documentation that is sufficient to enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit to understand what the audit procedures, the nature, timing and extent. What is nature, timing and extent, popularly known as NTE of audit procedures? We will discuss later on. Abhi ke liye try to understand ki audit procedures ka which kind of audit procedures, at what time and the extent, किस हद तक checking की है. So all that about the audit procedures, the experienced auditor should be able to understand. Then the results of the audit procedures performed and the audit evidence obtained, है ना. Audit documentation की definition ही क्या होती है? Audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained. So the experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit, he should be able to understand what audit evidence were obtained and the significant matters arising during the course of audit. Significant matters, for example, there was a matter as to whether some litigation was going against the company. Okay? So there was a matter as to whether a provision should be made with respect to that litigation, or it needs to be reflected as contingent liability in the notes to accounts. Okay? So this is what significant matter, whereby auditor applied his professional judgment. Hana? So both these things, that what was the significant matter, how auditor applied the professional judgment, that should also be maintained. Okay? So with respect to what? Significant matter. Okay? Abhi this topic is not complete. Pehle listen to me, then I'll look at your queries. Okay? So we have seen what audit procedures were performed, what audit evidence were obtained, and any significant matter जो during the conduct of audit आया हो और उसमें auditor ने अपनी professional judgment apply किया हो, that the experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit, he should be able to understand that. Okay? Now, when we are saying that nature, timing, extent of audit procedures performed ko karna hai document, it means that the auditor needs to record, auditor shall record the identifying characteristics of specific items or matters tested. Anna? For example, the auditor has maintained a record of all the audit procedures performed by him, okay, while he was checking what debtors. Out of all the debtors, let's say out of debtors worth, let's say 10 lakhs, total amount of debtors worth 10 lakhs, 10% of such debtors were related party. Hana? So identifying characteristics of the specific items or matters tested. So with respect to those related parties, auditor need to specifically maintain a separate documentation. Hana? Identifying characteristics of the specific items or the matters tested. ठीक है. Further, who performed the audit work and the date such audit work was completed, who reviewed the work and the date and extent of such review. समझ आता है. So with respect to first point, which is what NTE of audit procedures, the auditor needs to maintain a record of all these things. If there are certain identifying characteristics, example, I give you example of what? Your related party transactions. So auditor need to specifically mention that. Hana, who performed the audit, the date, who reviewed the audit, and the date and extent of the review. Okay? And when we are saying that with respect to significant matters, the auditor needs to maintain documentation. So it basically says, see, if any significant matter was there, Hana, let's say with respect to whether to maintain provision or contingent liability, or to show it as a contingent liability with respect to the litigation that is going on against the company, the auditor must have discussed that matter with the management. Hana. So the auditor needs to mention that as to with whom such matter was discussed. Hana. So the auditor shall document the discussions of significant matters, including the nature of significant matter discussed and when and with whom the discussion took place. क्या matter था, किसके साथ discuss किया and कब discuss किया. Further, if auditor has, if there was certain inconsistency, let's say management is saying that we will show it as a contingent liability, but auditor feels that no, it should, provision should be provided in the books of account. So if the auditor identified information that is inconsistent with the auditor's final conclusion regarding a significant matter, the auditor shall document as to how he addressed the inconsistency. तो जो भी significant matter है, क्या matter है, किसके साथ discuss किया, कब discuss किया, कोई inconsistency थी, then how it was addressed. For example, in this case, auditor was saying that a provision should be made, but management was saying that no, we have shown it as a contingent liability. So it might be possible, na, management has given certain reports from the legal experts or anything like that, Hana. So how that matter was addressed, how that inconsistency was addressed. Simple hai. Is it clear? Clear. Now this form, content, extent. So SA 230 says, as such, any experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit, he should be able to understand what NT of audit procedures, what audit evidence was obtained, and the significant matters and professional judgment applied thereto. बस इतना ही है. Further, ये सब तो होगा ही, है ना? The audit firms are going to maintain their audit documentation in such a way that any experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit, he will be able to understand all these things. But the form, content and extent of audit documentation depends upon various factors. Simple hai dekho. Size and complexity of entity. Jitna zyada, the huge the entity, the more documentation will be there. The more complex transactions are there, more audit procedures will be performed, more audit evidence will be obtained, and accordingly, the extent of audit documentation will have an impact. So the next topic is, what are the factors that affect the form, content, and extent of audit documentation? Simple hai dekho. Size and complexity of entity, nature of audit procedures performed. If you are asking for external confirmation, your content of audit documentation will be what? External confirmation from the debtors or creditors or banks. Hana? If you are doing certain calculations, the content will be what? Calculation based. Identified risk of material misstatement. See, this concept, risk of material misstatement, is in detail in chapter number 4. है ना? But risk of material misstatement क्या होता है? Just for the purpose of this chapter, risk that there may be a material misstatement in the financial statement. है ना? Identified risk of material misstatement. है ना? You all have done essay 315, like something about essay 315 in chapter number 2. Identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. है ना, किया है ना. So when the auditor identifies and assesses that the risk of material misstatement in the financial statement is high, obviously he is going to perform more audit procedure, thereby obtaining more audit evidence. है ना. Significance of audit evidence obtained. See, let's say with respect to checking the fixed deposits of a client, the audit evidence that the auditor obtains is the original FDR, fixed deposit receipt, which is an original. Now that document in itself is strong enough, na? It is so significant that it is alone sufficient. Hana? The auditor need not obtain other audit evidence as such if he is satisfied with the relevance, reliability of that original receipt. है ना. So significance of audit evidence obtained. अगर किसी item of financial statement के लिए you are not able to obtain a strong audit evidence, है ना, you will obtain one or more, two or more audit evidence with respect to that item. But अगर किसी item के लिए, for example, I gave you example of what FD, you obtain direct original fixed deposit receipt, so it is significant enough. So significance of audit evidence obtained. ठीक है. Nature, extent of exceptions identified. If any fraud risk is there, obviously the extent of audit documentation will be more. है ना. Audit methodology and tools. If you are doing certain calculations, if you are asking for external confirmation, if you are using certain computerized tool, obviously the form, content and extent will vary accordingly. Okay? So very simple topic, which is what are the factors which have an effect on the form, content and extent of audit documentation. So I hope it is clear. And Gaurav, I'll try to repeat this topic in Hindi. So as Gaurav is saying, to use Hindi also. So what we have done is what will be the form, content and extent. तो simple language में क्या है कि ऐसा form, content and extent रखना है auditor को that कोई भी experienced auditor जिसका previous connection ना हो audit के साथ, है ना, इस ऑडिट के साथ, एक्सपीरियंस्ड ऑडिटर तो है, उसको क्या समझ आना चाहिए कि क्या ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म किए, क्या ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन किए और कोई सिग्निफिकेंट मैटर आया ड्यूरिंग द कोर्स ऑफ ऑडिट, है ना, एंड क्या प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट अप्लाई किया. ठीक है, सिंपल है. Which point 3, Jyoti, please tell me. Now, when we are saying nature, time, extent of audit procedures, मतलब कोई identifying characteristics. I gave example of what related party कि debtors को तो check किया, but उसमें से कुछ क्या थे, related parties थे, है ना. Then क्या उनके identifying characteristics थे, who किसने काम किया, कब किया, किसने review किया. जो work होता है वो review भी तो करते हैं ना engagement partner. So who reviewed the work and the date and extent of such review. ठीक है. Then in case of what significant matters कि would matter आपने discuss किया होगा ना management के साथ. For example, there were merger and acquisition during the year. ठीक है. This is a significant matter during the conduct of that audit. So that must have been discussed with the management. To with whom, when, and what was the matter that was discussed. ठीक है. And in case of any inconsistency कि according to auditor, for example, litigation ka matter that we discussed, according to auditor, provision should have been made, but it has been shown as what contingent liability. If there is inconsistency, कुछ difference है जो management ने किया और जो auditor बोल रहा है, then how the same was addressed. Simple. Gaurav, is it clear now? See, let's say if there is a change of auditor, है ना? और let's say if any review work is to be done, external inspection होना है. अब audit documentation ऐसा maintain किया है कि auditor को खुद ही समझ नहीं आ रहा है कि what he has done during the conduct of audit, है ना. So that is why there are standards which give a uniformity to the way as to how the audit documentation is to be maintained. So agree that there will be a difference. Why? Because audit procedures, audit evidence and everything is going to differ from client to client. But it should be prepared in such a way that later on any audit firm though not having any connection, it should be able to understand that okay, these were the audit procedures performed, है ना. You are giving an expert opinion, एक profession है ना, आप ICAI को represent कर रहे हो ना, तो सभी members के लिए एक uniformity दिया है ना SAs ने. तो ऐसे 230 gives standard that this is the standard, these are the guidelines that you have to follow when you are making the audit documentation, when you are preparing the audit documentation. Clear? So students, essay 315 जो risk of material misstatement भी है का concept भी है जिसमें, that is in detail in your chapter number 4, है ना. So do not worry, Naga, Raju या Jyoti, if you haven't understood it in chapter number 2, it will be repeated in chapter number 4 also. ठीक है? So tell me, is it clear? So Gaurav, is it clear? ठीक है. Now, what are the various examples of audit documentation? So if I ask you, if you remember, I have told you that audit documentation, देखो क्या है कि जो भी काम किया है ना उसको आपको रिकॉर्ड करना है. Be it in paper form, you maintain certain box file, है ना, or be it on your desktop of your laptops, that is, be it in your soft copies, है ना. Now, what all are the examples of audit documentation? You all have done chapter number 2, whereby you have done audit program. पढ़ा है ना, पहले तो इसका बताओ मुझे. In chapter number 2, you all must have done audit program. So students, ठीक है, I'll try to repeat in Hindi also, Jyoti, ठीक है, पर ये बताओ कि audit program पढ़ा है chapter number 2 में. So what is audit program? इस पे सब लिखा होता है ना कि what all audit procedures are to be performed, by whom these will be performed, है ना. So tell me, is audit program an example of audit documentation? Audit program जो भी है, क्या उसको document करना जरूरी है? Yes or no? Quickly tell me. जो audit program है ना, आपने पढ़ा ना, series of what all actions the auditor is going to perform, audit program. So should that be included in audit documentation? Yes or no? Quickly send in your replies. Yes. So many of you are saying yes. Ayushi, Gaurav, Jyoti, Nagaraju, Mohammed, Anish. So it is one of the example of what? Audit documentation. है ना? So I told you that auditor जो भी काम कर रहे हो ना, for the audit of the financial statement of this client, उसको document करते जाओ. So quickly tell me, if you're doing certain calculations, certain analysis, will that be included as a part of audit documentation? I quickly need your answer, yes or no. Hana, quickly send in your replies. The answer is yes, Hana. If you have obtained certain external confirmations from the debtors, creditors, external confirmation क्या होता है? Simple language में तो आपको समझ आता है ना, that if the auditor has to confirm the balance of debtors or creditors in the balance of his client in the books of debtors or creditors, the auditor can send them a confirmation request letter that debtors, creditors, please मुझे लिख के दो ना कि क्या balance है मेरे client का in your books of accounts, है ना. So if he receives the response or if he sends the confirmation, that is also what part of audit documentation. Clear? Any mails, any checklist if he has prepared, कि I'll be checking or my team will be checking all these, everything will be included as a part of what? Audit documentation. So it may be recorded in paper or electronic form. Audit documentation includes audit program, any analysis, है ना, issue memorandum. What is memorandum? Summary. So any summary of the issues, summaries of significant matter, letters of confirmation and representation. So auditor obtains written representation from the management in terms of SA 580, which we will be doing in detail in this chapter. So wo bhi hoga checklist corresponding any email. So whatever work the auditor is going to conduct, is going to do during the course of audit, whatever audit evidence he is going to obtain, whatever conclusion he is going to draw when he's conducting the audit of the client, he's going to maintain an audit documentation of that. Okay. Further, students, if the auditor is obtaining certain agreements, certain contract copy, so that will also form what part of audit documentation. If you remember, one of the benefits, one of the purpose of audit documentation was what? Retaining a record of matters of continuing significance, है ना? तो कोई भी agreement है, कोई भी document है. So see, the auditor may include copies of entities, records, significant specific contracts or agreements as part of what? Audit documentation. Simple है. However, audit documentation is not a substitute for entities accounting record. Entities accounting record, entities के financial, entity के financial statement, if these are to be produced, तो वहां तो financial statements ही जाएंगे ना, audit documentation थोड़ी ना present कर दोगे, है ना? And further we will see अभी in the next after next 2 or 3 topics, you will see that audit documentation is the property of the auditor, है ना? So it is not a substitute for the entities accounting records. Simple है. Further, very very important, tell me, अब हमने क्या बोला, that the audit documentation should be maintained in such a way such that it is sufficient for an experienced auditor having no previous connection to understand the audit procedures, perform the audit evidence obtained. ठीक है? तो अगर कोई rough calculations किया आपने, है ना, कोई ऐसा डॉक्यूमेंट है जिसमें कैलकुलेशंस थे, आप जिसमें रफ कैलकुलेशंस थे, जिसको आपने हटाकर एक नया डॉक्यूमेंट ऐड किया, तो क्या दोनों डॉक्यूमेंट रखोगे और ओनली द फाइनल वन? क्विकली टेल मी, लॉजिकल सोचो ना. रफ कैलकुलेशंस है, उसको सुपरसीड, उसको रिमूव कर दिया बाय अ फाइनल कैलकुलेशन. टेल मी, बोथ और फाइनल? क्विकली सेंड इन योर रिप्लाईज. Both the documents or only the final? Only final, Suman is saying, which is absolutely correct. So we are saying कि experienced auditor को समझ आए. अगर हम ये सारे papers भी रख लेंगे, rough calculations, preliminary calculations, तो हमें नहीं समझ आएगा later on, है ना? So that is why it is saying the auditor need not include in audit documentation superseded drafts. What is meant by superseded? Replaced or removed drafts of working papers or financial statement notes that reflect incomplete or preliminary. Preliminary is what? Initial thinking. Previous copies of documents corrected for typographical or other errors and duplicates of the documents. Confused थोड़ी ना करना है ना? खुद भी कंफ्यूज नहीं होना ना कि लेटर ऑन ऑडिटर को ही समझ नहीं आ रहा कौन सा फाइनल डॉक्यूमेंट है, किसमें मिस्टेक है ना? सो this paragraph says that what all is not to be included. So you may get a question as a multiple choice question, that which of the following is not to be included in audit documentation? So first is checklist, then is issue memoranda, third is what? Superseded drafts of working papers, and last is all of the above. So what is the answer? Not to be included is what? Superseded drafts. Simple है, logical है, बहुत लॉजिकल है. Many of, in fact, all of you are saying, see, all of you are saying that the final one, ठीक है? So if rough calculations have which have been superseded drafts is what? The working papers which have been replaced by the final papers. अब जो replace हो गए हैं उनकी तो कोई वैल्यू नहीं है ना, तो उनको रिमूव कर दो. Clear? Is it clear? ठीक है. Now, answer my one question. When the auditor has to maintain an audit documentation, just think that whether the team, the engagement partner and his team, whether they should maintain audit documentation side by side as the audit progresses, or after they have completed the audit and have given the audit report, uske baad audit documentation maintain kare. So tell me, timely basis pe side by side karna chahiye ya later on? So your answer should be either side by side ya later on. Superseded is which has been replaced या which has been removed, उसकी जगह कोई और पेपर आ गया है ना. So Ayushi is saying ma'am side by side. Quickly send in your replies. So the answer is what? See, अब समझ आ गया कि फॉर्म कंटेंट एक्सटेंड क्या है. तो फॉर्म कंटेंट एक्सटेंड क्या है? जो भी प्रीवियस एक्सपीरियंस ऑडिटर having no previous connection with the audit को उसको enable करे to understand what the audit procedures, the audit evidence, significant matters, professional judgment. Simple. Audit documentation पेपर में हो सकता है, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक फॉर्म में हो सकता है. इसके अंदर ये सब कुछ इंक्लूड होगा, लेकिन सुपरसीडेड ड्राफ्ट्स नहीं इंक्लूड होंगे. एंड इट इज नॉट अ सब्स्टिट्यूट फॉर एंटिटीज अकाउंटिंग रिकॉर्ड्स, है ना. क्लियर? नाउ see, if the audit documentation that the audit team has to maintain, if it is prepared on a timely basis side by side, obviously the quality of such audit documentation is going to increase, है ना. See, if you are doing some work and you are putting the papers side by side in the file, or you are maintaining a record on the desktop of your laptop side by side, obviously the quality will increase, है ना. You will not forget anything. You will include each and every working paper that was supposed to be included, right? Further, it will help in effective review and evaluation of audit evidence, है ना. अगर side by side audit documentation हो रहा है on a timely basis, so it is going to help in review and evaluation of what? The audit evidence. Clear? So almost all of you have saying timely basis पे include करना है, and Ayushi is saying ma'am like me. चलो good. ठीक है. Now my next question to you, let's say if I have 5 clients, है ना, तो can I put like take a situation whereby in first situation I'm putting the papers relating to all my 5 clients in one box file or in one folder on my desktop, and a second situation whereby I have maintained separate 5 files and with respect to specific engagement, specific audit of all the respective 5 clients and keeping the papers in the respective file. तो situation 1 और situation 2, which one is better? पहले में मैंने क्या किया, एक box file लिया, उसमें सारे papers आ गए. Second में मैंने क्या किया, 5 separate box files लेके I put all the papers relating to a particular audit engagement in that file. So which situation in your which situation is better, 1 or 2? Quickly send in your reply. Students, I'm waiting for your replies. So Dhyanesh is saying ma'am separate files. Mohammed is saying ma'am specific. That is second option. Khojema is saying second option. Alok is saying separate folders. Suman separate. Then Sapna is saying second situation. G.R. Kanak is also saying situation 2 is better. Jyoti is also saying situation 2 is better. So, maintaining the audit documentation related to a specific engagement in 1 or 2 folders. When the auditor is maintaining 1 or 2 folders with respect to a specific engagement, such concept is known as what? Audit file. Anna? Audit file. So what is audit file? 1 or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing records that comprise the audit documentation for a specific engagement. एक अलग से अगर आप फोल्डर बना लेते हो अपने सिस्टम पर, let's say if it is been maintained on the as a soft copy on the computer screen, then if 1 or more folders are maintained with respect to a specific engagement, तो उसको क्या बोलेंगे? Audit file. Clear? Now we have just seen that audit documentation should be done in what? Timely basis. It should be done on a timely basis. Why? इससे क्या होगा? Quality of audit increase होती है. Further effective review and evaluation of audit evidence में ये help करता है. And if you will maintain a documentation after the audit has been completed, it is likely to be less accurate. है ना? हो सकता है ना कि later on you may forget to document any paper. So documentation prepared after the audit work has been performed is likely to be less accurate. Clear? Now, when the auditor is maintaining the audit file, let's say a team is there which is conducting the audit. Side by side, it is maintaining the audit documentation in the form of audit file only. Okay? Now, what in your understanding, is there any time that has been given that, okay, within this time you can maintain this audit file? And should there be any time that, okay, till this time you need to maintain such audit file? कितना टाइम तक retain करना है? कितना टाइम तक उस फाइल को complete करना है? So now we'll be discussing about that. तो अगर आपसे पूछते हैं कि ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन कैसे करना है, तो इट शुड बी मेंटेन्ड ऑन व्हाट? टाइमली बेसिस. व्हाई? बिकॉज क्वालिटी ऑफ द ऑडिट विल इंक्रीज. इट विल हेल्प इन effective review and evaluation of audit evidence obtained, and the audit documentation maintained after the audit work has been completed is likely to be less accurate. ठीक है? Audit file क्या होता है? One or more folders, whether in electronic or paper form or any other medium, with respect to a specific engagement. ये भी clear है कि सारे, I gave example of what I have 5 clients. I'm not putting the papers with respect to all the clients in a haphazard way. I have dedicated files for all my 5 clients. ठीक है? तो specific engagement का document I'm keeping in the specific file. ठीक है? Now, assembly of final audit file. Assembly, है ना? तो it might be possible ना that the audit team is conducting the audit, है ना? Side by side, it is maintaining what? Audit file. ठीक है? And now the audit report has been signed. But it might be possible ना कि the audit team has documented the audit papers, the working papers, but since there are certain administrative kind of work that is left, like numbering the papers, putting the initials, hana, cross, giving some reference that, okay, this calculation is on page number this, or removing the superseded drafts. So these are what? These are mechanical, administrative kind of work. Audit report तो जा चुका है, तो कोई the auditor is not as such now performing any new audit procedures, है ना? कोई new audit procedure या new judgment नहीं हो रहा है, but what he is doing, he is assembling the final audit file. He is doing certain administrative kind of work. So there is certain time limit that has been given that auditor अगर ये administrative kind of work भी करना है ना, तो इतने time period के लिए कर लेना, और जब आपका फाइल बन जाए तो इतने टाइम पीरियड के लिए उस ऑडिट फाइल को रिटेन कर लेना. मिनिमम टाइम पीरियड हैज बीन प्रिस्क्राइब्ड. क्लियर? अब हम क्या पढ़ने जा रहे हैं, समझ आता है? ठीक है? ठीक है. सो एग्जांपल्स ऑफ ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन वी हैव सीन कि पेपर में भी हो सकता है, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक में भी हो सकता है. इट विल इंक्लूड कॉपीज ऑफ एंटिटीज रिकॉर्ड, जैसे अग्रीमेंट्स वगैरह, है ना? It is not a substitute for entities accounting record. You may get a true false that the audit documentation is a substitute for entities accounting record, which is what? False, है ना? Superseded drafts of working papers or duplicates are not to be included. ठीक है? Yes, खोजिमा, absolutely correct. Assembly में आपका क्या आ गया? Index बनाना है आपको, है ना? So timely preparation में we have seen that it should be prepared on timely basis. Why? It will enhance the quality of audit. Okay. Further, it will facilitate effective review and evaluation of audit evidence, and audit documentation after audit work has been completed is likely to be less accurate. Clear? What is audit file? We have seen one or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing the records that comprise the audit documentation for a specific engagement. So the key word here is what? Specific engagement. Clear? ठीक है. Now assembly of final audit file. Assembly से क्या मतलब है, ये समझ आता है ना? That I told you that audit work has been completed, audit procedures हो गए हैं, audit report भी final हो गई है, but assembly में कुछ time लग सकता है ना. Now what is meant by assembly, है ना? तो पहले ये देखते हैं. So deleting or discarding superseded documentation. एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव काइंड ऑफ वर्क कौन से हो गए रिलेटिंग टू असेंबली ऑफ ऑडिट फाइल. एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव इज व्हाट? मैकेनिकल वर्क ही तो है ना, इसमें कोई आप जजमेंट थोड़ी ना लगा रही हो एज सच. डिलीटिंग और डिस्कार्डिंग सुपरसीडेड. सुपरसीडेड इज व्हाट? रिप्लेस्ड डॉक्यूमेंट्स, है ना. सॉर्टिंग. व्हाट इज सॉर्टिंग? अरेंजिंग. अरेंजिंग सिस्टमैटिकली. Collating is what? Collecting. Let's say there are 4 or 5 team members. Each of the members are having certain papers. So collating, collecting, cross-referencing the working papers. ठीक है. Signing off on checklist, completion checklist relating to file assembly process. Signing off, putting your initials, है ना, कि checklist के आगे tick लगाना कि okay, these all work have been done. Documenting audit evidence that the auditor has obtained, discussed and agreed with the relevant members of the engagement team before the date of auditor's report. तो जो भी काम आपका पहले date of auditor's report से before the date of auditor's report, whatever work you have done, any audit evidence that the auditor has obtained, has also discussed with the team members before the date of auditor report. तो अभी क्या काम कर रहे हैं? सिर्फ उसको डॉक्यूमेंट कर रहे हैं, उसको फाइल में लगा रहे हैं. तो as such, no new audit procedures are performed now. Only mechanical type of work has been performed. ठीक है. Now, what is the time limit? So students, if you remember, we have done standard on quality control in chapter number 1. And if you remember, I told you that there are 4 kind of engagement standards, है ना? On with respect to all the engagements, standard on quality control will be applicable. Now, what is the name of SQC1? Very simple. See, quality control for firms that perform audit, review of historical financial information, other assurance and related services. तो 4 types of engagements होते हैं ना, उसके ऊपर क्या करना है? Quality control. So what is the name? Quality control for firms that perform audit and review of historical information and other assurance and related services. ठीक है. So SQC1 says that first of all, if you remember, SQC1 हमेशा क्या बोलता है कि firm should establish policies and procedures with respect to assembly of final audit file. ठीक है. For the timely completion of assembly of audit file. So first of all, the firm will establish the policies and procedures. An appropriate time limit within which to complete the assembly of final audit file is ordinarily not more than 60 days from the date of auditor's report. जब audit reports, date of auditor's report is what? When the audit report has been signed. So within 60 days, not more than 60 days from that date, 60 days period is given for the assembly. अब assembly में क्या आता है? It is an administrative process that does not involve the performance of new audit procedures or drawing new conclusions. Why? Because audit report तो जा चुका है ना, अब थोड़ी ना new conclusions draw करोगे, अब थोड़ी ना new audit procedures perform करोगे. हाँ, assembly करना है, that is administrative kind of work. For example, what? Deleting, discarding, sorting, collating, signing off, all these things that can be done, and that too within 60 days from the date of audit report. Clear? Now with respect to retention, कि now audit file has been maintained with respect to particular specific engagement. अब कितना टाइम के लिए उसको retain करना है, कितना टाइम के लिए अपने ऑफिस में रखना है, retain करना है. So SQC1 again says that the firm needs to establish the policies and procedures for retention of audit of engagement documentation. However, that period should be no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report or the date of the group auditor's report. That is, whatever is the date of the audit report, from there, at least for 7 years, such audit documentation, such audit file should be retained by the audit firm. Clear hai? Let me just take you through the notes, because many of you are saying, ma'am, please show us the notes. So see, SQC 1, it's first of all says firm to establish policies and procedures for timely completion of what? Assembly of audit file, and also for what? Retention of the audit file. So complete assembly of final audit file. In order to complete that, the time period given is what? Not more than 60 days after the date of audit report. And after the date of audit report, only administrative kind of work can be done. No new audit procedures can be done. No new conclusions. Changes of only administrative nature. And examples we have seen is what? Sorting, collating, deleting the superseded documents. है ना? ठीक है. After assembly of audit file has been completed, not to delete or discard audit documentation before the end of retention period. है ना? And what is the retention period? No shorter than 7 years from the date of the audit report. The auditor needs to maintain it for what? For 7 years. No shorter than 7 years from the date of the audit report. So quickly send in your replies. Is it clear? See, ऑडिट प्रोग्राम स्टूडेंट, ऑडिट प्रोग्राम क्या होता है? आपने चैप्टर नंबर 2 में पढ़ा ना, एक सीरीज ऑफ एक्शंस है कि ये प्रोग्राम है, ऐसे ऐसे काम होएगा, इस डेट को होएगा, है ना? So it is one of the example of audit documentation. So when the auditor has prepared any audit program, he will document that, है ना? Clear? Whose dot was it? Muhammad Gora. It is one of the types of examples of audit documentation. So is it clear? Assembly of final audit file. Now, students, there is a topic relating to what? Documentation of significant matters and documentation of related significant professional judgment. Hana? When we were studying with respect to what form, content, and extent of audit documentation, we have seen that the documentation should be such that it should enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit to understand what? Audit procedures, audit evidence, and the third point was what? Significant matters. The professional judgment applied. So very simple topic, and the paragraph numbers are 1.10. That's it. 1.10 on page number 3.7. So I am giving you this to read as a homework. Students, I will not upload these notes, and the reasons I have already told you, that it might create confusion in your minds, and as such I am not writing anything new here. है ना? जो भी आपके मॉड्यूल में है उसी को I have written, and in fact the headings only I have written. ठीक है? So I have told you that homework page number 3.7 paragraph 1.10, because we have discussed it कि कोई भी significant matter है ना, fraud से related लगता है या any thing, the auditor needs to document that. And with respect to that, if any professional judgment is applied, I gave you example of what? Provisions and contingent liability की provision show make करना है, or it is to be shown as contingent liability. The auditor must have applied his professional judgment. Now auditor need to document that. If any estimate has been made, auditor must have applied his professional judgment, so he needs to document that. Okay? So before starting with the next topic, which is what? Completion memorandum or audit documentation summary, we will do one thing. We will take a quick break of 10 minutes here, and then after the break, we will start with this topic. Okay? So a break of 10 minutes here. So students, I hope you all are back after the break, and also please send in your replies whether you have understood so far or not. So whose doubt is this? Kanhaiya Singh. So it is specifically mentioned, Kanhaiya, that 7 years from the date of audit report. So after the audit has been done, the audit report is signed from that date, no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report. So Kanhaiya, is it clear? So students, I told you that this is the homework. You need to go through it. We have discussed it in detail. Now, topic paragraph number 1.11. Before that, please send in your replies whether till paragraph 1.9 till where we have covered, and in fact 1.10 also we have discussed. I have given that to you as homework, whether everything is clear or not. Please send in your doubts if any. Okay. Now we'll be starting with the next topic of completion memorandum or audit documentation summary. I just told you when we were discussing the various examples of audit documentation that memoranda or memorandum means what? Summary. Now students, we are saying that the audit and the auditor and his team, they needs to maintain what? They need to maintain audit documentation. Okay? Now in case of large organizations, where the number of documents in the audit documentation is huge, it is better to have a summary of the significant matters which were identified during the audit and the way they were addressed during the course of audit, right? Why? Because it will facilitate effective and efficient review and inspection of the audit documentation. If you're going through the audit documentation and the number of pages are in thousands, and you have a summary of all the significant matters and how they were addressed, so obviously that review work, that inspection work will concentrate on those significant matters. So then the chances that such significant matters are overlooked, that will be very less. Okay. So the auditor may consider it helpful to prepare and retain as a part of documentation a summary, sometimes known as completion memorandum, which describe the significant matters identified during the audit and how they were addressed. कैसे address किया उसको. Such summary will facilitate what? Effective and efficient review and inspection of audit documentation. So again, this is given where in essay 230 you may get a question to write a short note on audit documentation summary or completion memorandum. So simple है, एक summary है. See, in case of complex, in case of large and complex audits where the number of records that are there in the audit documentation, that is going to be huge. So it is always better to have a summary of the significant matters and the way they were addressed. Okay, clear? Now, who is the owner of audit documentation? Quickly tell me. Who is the owner, or fill in this blank? Just a minute. Don't send in your replies. Just wait. Fill in this blank. Send in your replies. Audit documentation बना लिया, audit file बना लिया. अब वो who is the owner of such audit documentation? So Ayushi, Sapna, Dhyanesh, Khojima, Sankar, Narayan, absolutely correct. It is the property of the auditor. ठीक है. So SQC 1 says it provides that unless otherwise specified by law or regulation, audit documentation is the property of the auditor. You may get true, false, MCQ, anything on this. He may at his discretion. What is meant by his discretion? At his choice. Make portions of or extract from the audit documentation available to the client. So as such, the auditor is not bound to give any part of the audit documentation to the client. That mandatory nahi hai. It is at his discretion, that is at his own choice. Auditor may make portions or extract such like some part of the audit documentation to the client, but such disclosure should not undermine the validity of the work performed, or in the case of assurance engagement, the independence of the auditor or office personnel. Okay? Now tell me, if there is one audit program, just a minute. There is audit program in the file, है ना? अभी the audit work is going on, ठीक है? And in the audit program, there is a list whereby it is mentioned surprise cash check will be held on so and so date. Now, if the auditor makes available this to the client, obviously it is going to make the audit less effective. Why? Because now the client knows that surprise check of the cash or the inventory or the investments will take place on so and so date. Hai? So it should not undermine the validity of the work performed. Samajh aaya? Clear? So it is the property of the auditor, and the auditor may at his own discretion, that is his own choice, make portions or extracts available from the documentation to the client. Clear? Is it clear? So with this, students, we have completed what? Audit documentation, which is essay 230. Let us just quickly give 5 minutes in order, and let us just quickly revise as to what all we have done in audit documentation, essay 230. After this, we will be starting with what? Essay 500, which is what? Audit evidence. So essay 230, the name is what? Audit documentation. It deals with the auditor's responsibility to prepare the audit documentation for an audit of financial statements. Okay? And the specific documentation requirement of other essays do not limit the application of this essay. तो अगर किसी essay में लिखा है कि materiality की audit documentation करना है, so it does not mean कि rest of the audit, for rest of the audit, the auditor is not required to maintain any audit documentation. Okay? Now, what is audit documentation? So whatever audit procedures auditor performs, whatever audit evidence he obtains, whatever conclusion he reaches, a record of all that is what? Audit documentation. Okay? Objective is to provide a sufficient appropriate record of basis for auditor's report and evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with essay applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Jyoti, what is not clear? Send in your query. Nature is nature of providing evidence that the with respect to auditor's basis for conclusion our audit was planned and performed in accordance with essay. Purpose का I told you that 3 points are relating to what? Engagement team. Engagement team को कैसे plan and perform करने में help करता है, direct supervise and review में help करता है, and accountable कौन है, future audits में help करता है. Inspection, next 2 points are related to inspection. One is related to internal inspection and the other is related to what? External inspection. So form, content and extent of audit documentation should be such that it should enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with the audit to understand NTE, nature, timing, extent of audit procedures performed, results of audit procedures and the audit evidence obtained, and significant matters and the professional judgment being applied. NTE of audit procedures say auditor shall record what? Identifying characteristics of specific items, who performed the audit work and the date, who reviewed the audit work and the date and extent. Okay. The significant matters. The auditor needs to document the discussion relating to significant matters, with whom such matter were discussed and when. Okay? And in case of any inconsistency, how they were addressed. Further, there are various factors which affect the form, content and extent, which is very simple. Various examples of audit documentation is what? It can be in paper, electronic or any other media. Audit program analysis, issue memorandum. Memorandum is what? Summary. Summaries of significant matters, letters of confirmation, checklist, correspondence, everything is included in what? Audit documentation. Copies of entities records like your contracts or agreements, they can also be included as audit documentation, but audit documentation is not a substitute for entities accounting record. And superseded drafts of working papers, the working papers which have been removed by the new final workings. So such superseded drafts, these need not be included in the audit documentation. It should be prepared on timely basis. Why? Usse quality of audit will increase, effective review and evaluation of audit evidence hoga, and documentation prepared after the audit work has been performed is going to be less accurate. Audit file is what? One or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing the record that comprise the audit documentation for a specific engagement. So SQC 1 says that administrative kind of work can be done for not more than 60 days from the date of auditor's report. And what is the administrative kind of work? These examples which are given in this box. Very, very important. You may straightforward get a 4-marker question. That what are the administrative changes that can be made in the assembly of the final audit file. And the retention period is what? No shorter than 7 years from the date of the auditor's report. Audit documentation summary kya hai? Large complex audit mate is always what? Helpful to prepare and retain as part of audit documentation. So audit documentation ka hi part hai. Usme ek summary hoga of significant matters identified during the audit and how they were addressed. Okay. So ownership. So it basically says ownership of audit documentation. So SQC1 ने clear कर दिया. Jyoti, listen to this. That audit documentation is the property of the auditor. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि client is saying that auditor, since these papers relate to my company, or the management will say that these papers relate to my company, give all these papers to me mandatorily. No, it is the property of the auditor, and auditor may at his own choice, अगर auditor चाहता है तो ही उसको audit documentation provide करें. अगर auditor नहीं चाहता तो client को मत दे audit documentation. Why? Because audit documentation काम किसने किया? Auditor ने किया है ना, auditor की team ने किया है ना, तो वो तो उसी की property है ना. So he may at his discretion, at his own choice, at his own will make portions or extracts. He may, देखो shall नहीं लिखा है, may. उसको करना है तो कर दे अवेलेबल वर्किंग पेपर्स, है ना. अगर नहीं देना है वर्किंग पेपर्स तो ना दे, ठीक है. बट इट शुड नॉट अंडरमाइन द वैलिडिटी ऑफ द वर्क परफॉर्म, ठीक है. सो इज इट क्लियर? इज इट क्लियर? एंड द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ द ऑडिटर और हिज पर्सोनल. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि ऑडिटर बायस हो गया एंड देन हिज then he is making available the audit documentation to the client कि देखो हमने ये काम किया, आप इसको जल्दी से ठीक कर लो. That he is not independent. ऐसा भी नहीं होना चाहिए, ठीक है. Is it clear? So Jyoti is saying yes, Ayushi is saying yes, and Sapna is also saying ma'am it is clear. See what are the actions and everything you will be doing, Priyanka, this in detail in your professional ethics in your finals. Okay. So quickly students, is the topic audit documentation clear? And as I always tell you that when at home you will be going through this entire chapter till where we have done today, go through the illustrations, examples, like go through each and every line of the module. Then you will be able to answer the MCQs also on your own. Chalo. Now let us start with audit evidence, SA 500. So what is the relevant essay? SA 500. And the name is what? Audit evidence. Okay? So when we started discussing this chapter, we understood the meaning of the term evidence, Hana? And I told you that the overall objective of the auditor in terms of SA 200 is what? To express an opinion on the financial statement. Now, when the auditor is giving an expert opinion on the financial statement, he is saying whether the financial statement reflected true and fair view or not. सी ही इज गिविंग एन एक्सपर्ट ओपिनियन, है ना, तो वो ऐसे थोड़ी ना दे देंगे. That must be based on certain proof, that must be based on certain evidence. So what is the dictionary meaning of term evidence? Facts. Fact signs that make you believe that something is true. So auditor must obtain audit evidence जिससे उसको लगा है that financial statement reflect a true and fair view, और या in other case जिससे उसको लगा है that the financial statement do not reflect a true and fair view. So the opinion of the auditor must be based on what? Audit evidence. और audit evidence कैसे मिलते हैं? By performing what? Quickly send in your replies. By performing what the auditor obtains audit evidence? Quickly send in your replies. Audit evidence कैसे मिलता है? क्या perform करता है auditor? So the answer to this, I'll give you a hint. The answer to this question is hidden in the definition of term of audit documentation. So yes, Alok is correct, Kojema is correct, Renuja is correct. Audit procedures. Audit procedures, मतलब जो भी procedures during the conduct of audit हुए, based on that auditor obtains what? Audit evidence. है ना? Like when the auditor is performing certain audit procedure, he obtains certain information. Based on that, he draws certain conclusions with respect to various items of financial statement, and based on that, he arrives at his opinion. इतना समझ आता है? ठीक है. Now I told you that SA 500 and the name is what? Audit evidence. So in terms of SA 500, the definition of term audit evidence, it says that information used by the auditor. So we have seen this is the information that the auditor uses in arriving at the conclusions. In arriving at the conclusions, about various items of the financial statement on which the auditor's opinion is based. So auditor will obtain information with respect to various items of financial statement, building ke le liya, then let's say plant and machinery, P&L items, all assets, all liabilities, and he will draw various conclusions with respect to all these items, and then he will draw his opinion. Okay? So what is audit evidence? Audit evidence is the information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. Quickly read it again. Information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. Simple है ना? ऐसी information जो auditor use करता है किसमें? To arrive at various conclusions. क्यों? On which the auditor's opinion is based. Right? Now, such information, it includes two types of information. Information contained in accounting records underlying the financial statement and other information. अब ये क्या होता है ये हम डिटेल में देखेंगे. ठीक है? So, we will look at this information part later on. So, SA 500, the name is what? Audit evidence. It says as to what constitutes an audit evidence. Further, it deals with the auditor's responsibility. Student, I have told you that each and every essay will deal with auditor's responsibility. It will have objective of the auditor. Right? So, essay 500 deals with the auditor's responsibility. Now, if you remember, I told you कि audit evidence कहाँ से मिलता है? Audit procedures perform करने से. So, to design and perform audit procedures. Why? To obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Sufficient. What is meant by sufficient? What is meant by appropriate? हम discuss करेंगे बहुत detail में. to be able to draw conclusions on which to base auditor's opinion. Audit procedures करके ही तो audit evidence मिलता है ना. जब audit evidence मिलता है तो बहुत सारे conclusions draw होते हैं ना with respect to various items of financial statement. Based on those conclusions, auditor bases is what? Auditor's opinion. And what is the objective of the auditor? Same. That auditor needs to perform the audit procedures, design and perform the audit procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to be able to draw conclusions on which to base the auditor's opinion. Clear hai? Now, audit evidence kya hota hai? We saw that it is information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. This includes two types of information. What are these two? Let us do it from the module. So information, see audit evidence kya tha? Information, it includes information contained in the accounting records, jo accounting records mein aa rahe hain, and other information that authenticates the accounting records. Authenticates is what? That certifies or that proves. Also supports the auditor's rationale behind the true and fair presentation of financial statement. So two type of information are there. Okay? Now students tell me, can I use ledgers or the general entries or the various contract copies as audit evidence? Yes or no? Quickly send in your reply, yes or no. Quickly send in your replies. So students are saying, ma'am, yes. Only one is saying no. Chalo dekhte hain. Tell me, can I use minutes of the meeting as one of my audit evidence? For example, any share capital, there has been an issue of share capital during the year. So can I use the minutes of the meeting whereby the resolution was passed as an evidence that such resolution or such issue of share capital is in terms of, or it is in compliance of the Companies Act 2013? Can I use that minute? So the answer is yes. Okay? So that minute, see that minutes of the meeting, they as such are not part of the accounting records. Hana? These are what? Other information that authenticates the accounting records. कि जो accounts में आ रहा है वो ठीक है या नहीं, उसका proof है ना. For example, minutes of the meeting, written confirmation, जो मैंने external confirmation client से लिया, तो as such, is it a part of the financial statements or the accounting records? No, but it is authenticating the accounting record. कि debtor सामने वाला पार्टी भी क्या कह रहा है, 5 lakhs का ही balance है, book में भी 5 lakhs ही आ रहा है, right? So this is what other information that authenticates, certifies or proves the accounting record and supports the auditor's rationale behind the true and fair presentation of financial statement. ठीक है? So अभी इसको डिटेल में समझते हैं. So two types of information contained in accounting records, like the entries, the supporting records such as the checks, the records of electronic fund transfer, then invoices, contract copies, thus general subsidiary ledgers, general entries, adjustments, records such as worksheets, spreadsheets, computation, reconciliation, disclosure. So these are the information contained in accounting records, cost sheet अगर बनाया है, so that is prepared with respect to the accounting record, right? The entries, the ledgers that have been prepared that are a part of the accounting records, so audit evidence can include that also, right? Then other information which though is not a part of the accounting record, like minutes of the meeting, है ना, कोई पार्ट ऑफ द अकाउंटिंग रिकॉर्ड थोड़ी ना है. रिटन कंफर्मेशन, मैनुअल्स कंटेनिंग डिटेल्स ऑफ इंटरनल कंट्रोल, की कैसे कोई सिस्टम चलता है, जो मैनुअल होता है ना उसका वर्किंग गाइडलाइन, तो वो कोई पार्ट थोड़ी ना है. बट यस, दैट कैन बी यूज्ड एज एन एविडेंस इफ इट इज रेलेवेंट फॉर द ऑडिटर. So, other information which may be used as audit evidence includes minutes of the meeting, written confirmation from debtors, trade payables, manuals containing details of internal control. A combination of test of accounting records and other information is generally used by the auditor to support his opinion on the financial statements. Clear? So, audit evidence क्या है? सबसे पहले तो SA 500. The name is what? Audit evidence. Just a minute. So it explains as to what constitutes audit evidence. Audit evidence क्या होता है? And deals with auditor's responsibility to design and perform audit procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to be able to draw conclusions on which to base auditor's opinion. ठीक है? What is the definition? Audit evidence is information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. Such information includes both information contained in the accounting records underlying the financial statement and other information. Accounting records underlying the financial statement, मतलब जो भी आपके financial statement prepare करने में accounting records use हुए हैं. Underlying is what? Which are the basis of preparation of financial statement. अब financial statement आपकी general entries, ledgers के basis पे बनता है ना. So these are what? Accounting records underlying the financial statement and other information. Now, what all is included in information contained in accounting records and other information? I hope it is clear now. So, Sujal, Priyanka are saying, ma'am, minutes of the meeting can be used as audit evidence. Chakshu is also saying the same thing. See, audit evidence is what? कोई information है ना आपके पास, बेस्ड ऑन विच यू आर गिविंग एन ओपिनियन. ठीक है? फर्दर ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन क्या कहता है? अगर कोई इंफॉर्मेशन है ना, उसको सिर्फ यहां मत रखो, माइंड में मत रखो, उसको डॉक्यूमेंट कर लो, उसी को ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन भी बना लो. खोजे मा, इज इट क्लियर? है ना, कि अगर आपके ऑडिट एविडेंस क्या है, कोई भी इंफॉर्मेशन है बेस्ड ऑन विच यू आर ड्रॉइंग सर्टन कंक्लूजन दैट डेटर्स करेक्ट है या नहीं है. ठीक है? आपने एक्सटर्नल कंफर्मेशन ले लिया क्लाइंट से, थर्ड पार्टी से, and you find that debtors balance is not matching. Ab this is what audit evidence. ठीक है? Now do not just throw away that paper. Maintain an audit documentation of that. है ना? So that is why देखो audit documentation की क्या definition है? Audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained. तो जितना भी ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन होगा उसको डॉक्यूमेंट करना है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन. क्लियर खोजेमा? इज इट क्लियर? ठीक है? नाउ, ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द ऑडिटर वी हैव सीन, टू एनेबल द ऑडिटर टू डिजाइन एंड परफॉर्म ऑडिट प्रोसीजर इन सच अ वे. तो देखो इसको कैसे याद करोगे ना, हाउ टू लर्न ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स. आपको पता है परफॉर्म करते हैं तो क्या होता है? ऑडिट एविडेंस मिलता है. ऑडिट एविडेंस मिलता है तो आप क्या बोलते हो? यू ड्रॉ वेरियस कंक्लूजन्स. बेस्ड ऑन ऑल दोज कंक्लूजन्स आप क्या देते हो? ओपिनियन देते हो. So the objective of the auditor is to design and perform audit procedures in such a way as to enable the auditor to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to be able to draw reasonable conclusions on which to base the auditor's opinion. Clear? Is it clear? And information to be used. Okay, now this is the next topic. So tell me, is it clear till topic paragraph 2.3? ठीक है? Now students, tell me what can be various sources of audit evidence. कहां से audit evidence मिल सकता है? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies. टू 2.3 तक क्लियर है किसको? Hello, good. So tell me, what can be various sources of audit evidence? Audit evidence कहाँ से मिल सकता है बताओ? Accounting record से मिल सकता है? फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट में जो अकाउंटिंग रिकॉर्ड्स हैं आपके, हाँ अभी पढ़ा हमने कि यहाँ से मिल सकते हैं. सो आयुषी इज सेइंग मैम हर जगह से. चलो गुड, ठीक है. टेल मी, प्रीवियस ऑडिट में, प्रीवियस ईयर जो आपने ऑडिट किया था, वहां पर अगर you became aware about certain thing, can that be used as an audit evidence this year also? So the answer is yes. Let's say last year also there were certain related party transaction, you drew certain conclusion about that. This year also there are related party transaction with those parties. So your knowledge of the last year previous audit can be used as an audit evidence this year. ठीक है? Then from accounting records, from previous audit, by performing audit procedures during the course of audit, right? Then from management's expert. Now, who is a management expert? What consideration should, what factors should auditor consider when he's using the work of management's expert as audit evidence? So we will be studying this topic now. So yes, अकाउंटिंग रिकॉर्ड्स में आ गया ना. स्टूडेंट्स आर सेइंग मैम परचेज, इनवॉइस, डेटर्स, क्रेडिटर्स, बैंक स्टेटमेंट, तो ये सब कुछ अकाउंटिंग रिकॉर्ड्स में आ गया ना. ठीक है. Yes, balance confirmation from third parties, these all can be what sources of audit evidence. ठीक है. Now tell me, if any information, let's say if any cost sheet has been given by the entity to the auditor ki auditor ye lo cost sheet and use it as an audit evidence, will the auditor take it like that only without checking it? So the answer is no. Hana? So when the auditor is using the information produced by the entity as audit evidence, before using that he needs to obtain an evidence as to whether that information is accurate and complete. है ना? So he will review that work ना कि वो work correct है या नहीं. So whether that information is what accurate and complete. Also he will evaluate whether information is sufficiently precise and detailed for the auditor's purposes. Precise is what? Correct or right. है ना? तो कोई भी इंफॉर्मेशन विच हैज बीन प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय द एंटिटी, उसको यूज करने से पहले एज एन ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑडिटर विल ऑब्टेन एन ऑडिट एविडेंस अबाउट द एक्यूरेसी एंड कंप्लीटनेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, कि एक्यूरेट है या नहीं, कंप्लीट है या नहीं, एंड वेदर दैट इंफॉर्मेशन इज करेक्ट, sufficiently precise. Precise is what? Correct or right and detailed for the auditor's purposes. Tabhi to auditor is going to use that as an audit evidence. So this was about what? Information produced by the entity, right? Now there is a topic, information with respect to the work, information to be used at audit evidence. And what is that information? It is the information provided by the management's expert. It is the information provided by the management expert. So let's try to understand this with the help of an example. A Limited is our client and X, Y, Z and associates are what? The statutory auditors. Now A Limited, certain litigation is going on and they have hired certain legal expert. Now our auditor, they are going to use the information provided by these legal experts which are hired by the management. That is why known as what? Management expert. So when the XYZ and associate are using the information provided by legal expert, management expert as audit evidence, what all the auditor need to consider? This is our next topic. ठीक है. So whenever the auditor is going to use any information, he needs to see whether it is relevant for the purpose of the audit and whether it is reliable. अगर auditor को पता है reliable है नहीं, see what is meant by reliable, relevance. Relevance is whether it is useful for the auditor's purposes, and what is meant by reliable, whether auditor can trust it or not, है ना. तो relevance and reliability तो देखना ही है. Further students, relevance and reliability, we will be doing it in detail in the next session. Okay. Now, using the work of management expert. So first, let us try to understand who is management expert. So an individual or organization. So legal expert का example हमने लिया ना in our example. Possessing expertise in field other than accounting, auditing. Accounting auditing में तो the auditor is the expert ना. So the individual organization possessing expertise in the field other than accounting auditing, whose work in that field, like legal or environment expert, is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement. है ना. So let's say the company, the A Limited in our case, it has taken an opinion from the legal expert as to whether, with respect to a litigation, contingent liability is sufficient or provision is to be made, right? So an individual or organization possessing expertise in field other than accounting and auditing, whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing financial statements. Example, legal expert or environment expert. Okay? So this is what management expert. Now, if management expert has given an opinion and the auditor is going to use it, so before that, the auditor needs to evaluate. The auditor will what? He will evaluate the competence, capability, and objectivity of that expert. The competence, capabilities, and objectivity of that expert. Whether that legal expert is competent, whether he has the capability of giving that opinion, and whether he is unbiased. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि जो legal expert है वो A Limited में let's say Mr. A is the director, वो Mrs. A ही है. He is not objective. The auditor will obtain an understanding of the work of the expert. The auditor will obtain an understanding that what work that legal expert is doing, what kind of opinion that legal expert is giving. And auditor will evaluate the appropriateness of that expert's work for the auditor's purposes, whether that work is appropriate, relevant or not, है ना. ऐसी थोड़ी ना किसी का भी work use कर लेंगे. अगर आप management expert का work use करते हैं, first of all management expert कौन होता है? Any individual or organization possessing expertise in field other than accounting and auditing, whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statements. ठीक है. So auditor will evaluate the competence, capability and objectivity, है ना, to obtain an understanding of the work of the expert, and auditor will evaluate the appropriateness of that expert's work. Once satisfied with all these three things, then only auditor will use the work of the management's expert. ठीक है. Is it clear? Quickly send in your replies. So we have seen that when the auditor is using the information which is provided by the entity, he'll obtain audit evidence about the accuracy, completeness of the information, है ना. ऐसे थोड़ी ना किसी भी information पे आप rely कर लोगे, फिर तो audit का purpose ही क्या हुआ ना, right? So he will first inquire, he'll obtain audit evidence about the accuracy, completeness of information and whether it is correct or right, sufficiently precise for his purposes. ठीक है. And in case of management expert, we have seen he'll consider what the competence, capability, and objectivity, his understanding. He'll obtain an understanding of the work of expert and evaluate the appropriateness of that expert's work. Students, you can always get a direct 3-marker question with respect to this question. Direct question banta hai na? So many of you are saying, ma'am, it is clear. Okay? Now, this topic abhi I am leaving. We will do this later on. Tell me, let's say if the auditor obtains certain information, let's say the ledgers are saying with respect to a debtor balance, let's say Mr. Ram, appearing in the books of the client, the balance is 5 lakhs, but the external confirmation that the auditor has obtained from Mr. Ram, he has said that the balance is 5, let's say 4.5 lakhs. Now, this is what inconsistency. है there is inconsistency of the audit evidence obtained. Difference है ना with respect to audit evidence obtained from one source and the other. Inconsistency. Or if he has doubt over the reliability of audit evidence, अब doubt आ गया ना कि ये 5 lakh correct है नहीं, तो what will auditor do? Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies without looking at the module. आपने कोई ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन किया जो इनकंसिस्टेंट है और यू हैव अ डाउट ओवर इट्स रिलायबिलिटी, थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा वर्क कर लेंगे. सो ऑडिटर विल मॉडिफाई और ही विल परफॉर्म व्हाट एडिशनल ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स. थोड़ा सा एक्स्ट्रा वर्क कर लेते हैं ना, सीधा ही थोड़ी ना ओपिनियन दे देंगे कि सब कुछ गलत है. Auditor will perform what? Modification. He will determine the modification or addition to the audit procedures. Okay? And then after doing that, he'll consider the effect of the matter on the other aspects of the audit. Ki, let's say auditor then discussed with the management. See, when he saw that there is a difference 5 lakhs and the other party saying 4.5 lakhs, he discussed it with the management. So when he's discussing, he's doing what? He's performing inquiry. This is again what? An audit procedure. Hana? Based on that, if he's satisfied, accordingly, he'll consider its impact on the other aspects of audit. So let's say if he's not satisfied, Hana, then he'll check other balances also in detail. है ना. So he'll consider the effect of that matter on other aspects of audit. तो ऑडिटर को लगता है कि जब मैंने मैनेजमेंट से इंक्वायर किया ना, मैनेजमेंट झूठ बोल रहा है, तो लेट मी जस्ट चेक ऑल द डेटर बैलेंसेस इन डिटेल, लेट मी जस्ट आस्क फॉर द एक्सटर्नल कंफर्मेशन फ्रॉम ऑल द डेटर बैलेंसेस, है ना. तो कंसीडर द इफेक्ट ऑफ द मैटर ऑन अदर एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ ऑडिट की अदर एस्पेक्ट्स पे क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगा ऑफ ऑडिट. क्लियर? Is it clear? Simple है ना, that he will determine the modification or addition to the audit procedures. ठीक है. Now students, if you remember in the chapter so far, wherever we have discussed about audit evidence, I have always used the term the auditor needs to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Okay. Now the question is, what is meant by sufficiency and what is meant by appropriateness of audit evidence? Audit evidence क्या होता है कि information जो auditor use कर रहा है in order to draw the conclusions on which he is going to base his opinion. ठीक है. Now कितना audit evidence sufficient है, कितना audit evidence appropriate है, now we are going to discuss that. And students, wherever in your exam or wherever in the module you will see the term audit evidence, you will see that it has a prefix, what? Sufficient and appropriate. We are not saying that auditor needs to obtain audit evidence. We always say that auditor needs to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. है ना? So for all those who say, ma'am, how to obtain marks, तो जब भी आप audit evidence लिखते हो उसके पहले sufficient and appropriate आना चाहिए ना, because there is a requirement in SA 500 that auditor needs to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. ठीक है. Now my query to you all, tell me what is meant by sufficient without looking at the screen. Sufficient. What is meant by sufficiency? Sufficiency. Send in your replies. So sufficiency, it is the measure of quantity. It is the measure of what? Quantity of audit evidence. कि कितना quantity of audit evidence obtain करना है. Appropriateness is the measure of quality of audit evidence. That what should be the quality of audit evidence. ठीक है? ठीक है. So now first we will try to understand what? Sufficiency. ठीक है? So when the auditor is obtaining audit evidence, auditor will consider whether he has obtained sufficient audit evidence. That is, whether the quantity of audit evidence is enough. Hana? Now tell me quantity. If I just ask you one thing, tell me if auditor assesses under essay 315, identifying and assessing the risk of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. Remember the name of the essay you have done in chapter number 2. So if auditor identifies and assesses the risk of material misstatement की risk है जो कि high है, tell me what is going to be the impact on the quantity. Will it be high or will it be low? Auditor को क्या लगता है? He assesses that there is a high chances of risk of material misstatement. Tell me what is going to be the impact on the quantity of audit evidence. Quickly tell me high or low. Send in your replies. Measure of quantity of audit evidence. And my question is that if auditor assesses that there is a higher risk of material misstatement, what is going to be the impact on the quantity of audit evidence? So many of you are saying high, which is absolutely correct. One or two are saying low. No. See, quantity of audit evidence. So अगर आपको लगता है कि ये जो debtor है, let's say debtors total 10 lakhs के हैं, जिसमें आपको क्या लगता है that with respect to debtors of 2 lakhs there is a higher risk of material misstatement because ये related party है, तो उसके लिए आप ज्यादा audit procedures perform करके ज्यादा audit evidence obtain करोगे ना. Why? Because you have assessed that there is a high risk of material misstatement. Hana? What is my example? That debtors, let's say total debtors of the client is worth rupees 10 lakhs. Out of that 2 lakhs जो है ये related party है. So here the auditor assesses that the risk of material misstatement is high. So obviously the auditor is going to perform more audit procedure, thereby obtaining more audit evidence. So the quantity of the audit evidence will be high. Tell me, so for all those who were saying low, tell me, is it clear now? So Pranav, Khojema, tell me, is it clear? Dhyanesh, I need replies from all three. Pranav is saying, ma'am, it is clear. Khojema and Dhyanesh. है ना, जहां आपको ज्यादा रिस्क लगेगा, आप ज्यादा काम करोगे ना वहां पर, तो ज्यादा ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन करोगे. ठीक है. देन क्वालिटी ऑफ ऑडिट एविडेंस. If you remember, I gave you an example. If you need to check the fixed deposits and you have the original fixed deposit receipt, so the quality such that only that document is enough. उसके अलावा और कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट लेने की जरूरत नहीं है. That is, there is no need to increase the quantity of the audit evidence. है ना? So if the quality is good, then lower quantity is also sufficient, is also fine. Clear? So what we have done, that sufficiency means it is a measure of quantity of audit evidence कि कितना audit evidence लेना है. तो auditor को हम क्या बोलते हैं कि auditor आपको audit evidence इतना लेना है जो sufficient and appropriate हो. ठीक है. And then students tell me, अब कितना audit evidence sufficient है? It is a matter of professional judgment ना, केस टू केस बेसिस पे ऑडिटर विल अप्लाई हिज प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट ना कि यहाँ पर सफिशिएंट है. ऐसा थोड़ी ना है कि कहीं पे आईसीआई के गाइडलाइंस में लिखा है या इन एसए 500 इट इज मेंशन कि 2 ऑडिट एविडेंस ले लो या 3 ऑडिट एविडेंस ले लो. इट डिपेंड्स अपॉन द ऑडिटर्स प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट, right? Now when the auditor is deciding as to what quantity is enough, he will see the assessed risk of material misstatement. If auditor feels that in his professional judgment there is a higher risk of material misstatement, obviously he is going to obtain more audit evidence. Same way with respect to quality, agar auditor ko lagta hai that the quality, it is such a strong audit evidence that one is enough. Okay? Now tell me, is it possible that auditor says that I will obtain 2 or 3 audit evidence and then I can compromise with the quality of the audit evidence? Yes or no? कि 3-4 audit evidence ले लिए हैं, अब quality आ रहा है या नहीं, that is not an issue. Is it possible? So the answer is what? No. Okay? So let us just have a look at this from the module. So students, abhi I have left this topic, and in fact this topic is in detail in your chapter number 7 when you will be doing essay 530 audit sampling. Okay? So sufficiency is the measure of quantity of audit evidence. The quantity of audit evidence needed is affected by auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. The higher the assessed risk, the more audit evidence is likely to be required. And also by the quality. The higher the quality, the less audit evidence may be required. I gave you example of what? FD. Original FDRs. Obtaining more audit evidence, however, may not compensate for its poor quality. So you may get a true false here that the quality of the audit evidence affects the quantity of the audit evidence. The higher the quality, the less may be required. Also, if the auditor obtains more quantity of audit evidence, it will compensate for the poor quality. And the answer is what? False. This statement is not correct. Because ऐसा थोड़ी ना कि आप क्वालिटी के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर लोगे कि इधर उधर से इंफॉर्मेशन ले लिया. You are showing them as audit evidence and you are compensating for the poor quality. Clear? Now, student, I told you कि ऐसा नहीं है कि कहीं पर ऐसे 500 में लिखा है कि you obtain 1 audit evidence या 2 audit evidence या 3 audit evidence. ऐसा नहीं है. तो sufficiency का एक broad parameter दे दिया गया है that it means the quantity and it is affected by the risk of material misstatement or the quality also. Now it depends upon what auditor's professional judgment. Auditor का जो professional judgment है वो ही तो auditor apply करके देखेगा ना that whether that this audit evidence is sufficient or not. Now auditor's professional judgment regarding the sufficiency of audit evidence is affected by 3 factors. What are these? Simple हैं देखो. अब आप auditor बन जाओ and apply your professional judgment. Tell me, if any item is material, material is what? Important. You all have done essay 320. Material क्या होता है? Which affects the economic decision of the users of the financial statement. Now tell me, my question to you, if any item is material, tell me the quantity of the audit evidence will be high or less, more or less. Send in your replies. अगर कोई मटीरियल आइटम है, ठीक है, तो उसके लिए ज्यादा ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन करोगे या कम? अब यू आर द ऑडिटर, यू आर अप्लाइंग योर प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट. One of the factors is what? Materiality. So if you have to see that whether with respect to depreciation or let's say with respect to debtors I need to obtain sufficient how much audit evidence, you will first think whether it is material or not. If it is material, tell me. So Sujal, Khojema, Dhyanesh, Jyoti, Vidya, all are saying high, which is absolutely correct. So if materiality, if any item is material, obviously the auditor is going to obtain more audit evidence. Now the next, if the risk of material misstatement, auditor assesses that the risk of material misstatement is high, tell me what will be the impact on the quantity of the audit evidence? Right, 2 and more or less. Right, 2. So again the answer is what? Obviously high, right? We have just done it. ठीक है? Now with respect to size and characteristics of the population, just listen to it carefully. See, size and characteristics of population. So if the population is small, population is what? The items that are to be tested. ठीक है? And characteristics, that is small भी है and similar भी है, homogeneous. Homogeneous is what? Similar. Similar. अगर small population है, let's say 10 debtors, let's say you have debtors, 100 debtors हैं, सबके balances around 50,000 है. Small population, homogeneous, that is similar. So you may collect the audit evidence on a sample basis because ये सब क्या है? Similar है. Clear? Just a minute. Is it clear? On the other hand, if the population is large and heterogeneous, heterogeneous is what? Different. तो आपको सभी के लिए फिर you need to perform audit procedure and you need to obtain what? Audit evidence. Clear? Is it clear? ठीक है? So let us just have a look. So we are saying that sufficiency क्या है? It is a matter of professional judgment of the client, of the auditor, and there are various factors that affect the auditor's judgment as to sufficiency of audit evidence, like materiality. So less audit evidence would be required in case assertions are less material to the users of financial statement. But on the other hand, if assertions are more material to the users of financial statement, more evidence would be required. Simple. रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट. नाउ व्हाट इज रिस्क ऑफ मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट? ये हम चैप्टर नंबर 4 में डिस्कस करेंगे डिटेल में. सो लेस एविडेंस वुड बी रिक्वायर्ड इन केस assertions that have lower risk of material misstatement, but on the other hand, if assertions have a higher risk of material misstatement, more evidence would be required. So basically I have told you that what is risk of material misstatement, but what are its components वो मैंने आपको नहीं बताया, जो चैप्टर नंबर 4 में आप करोगे. Size of population. It refers to the number of items included in the population. Less evidence would be required in case of smaller and more homogeneous population. But on the other hand, in case of larger and more heterogeneous population, more audit evidence would be required. So I hope it is clear now. Is it clear? So we have done what? Sufficiency of audit evidence. कि sufficiency क्या होता है? Quantity होता है. It is a matter of what? Auditor's professional judgment, which is affected by 3 factors: materiality, risk of material misstatement, size and characteristics of the population. Now, what is meant by appropriateness? So appropriateness is the quality of audit evidence. कि quality कैसी है audit evidence की, है ना? So auditor needs to obtain what? Sufficient and appropriate. The audit evidence should be sufficient as well as what? And है, और नहीं है, and appropriate. ठीक है? So what is meant by appropriateness? So we have seen it is related to what? Quality. ठीक है? Now what is meant by quality of audit evidence? So SC 500 says it deals with the relevance of the information to be used as audit evidence. कि जो information जो आपका audit evidence है, whether it is relevant, useful, whether it has logical connection with the purpose of audit procedure, the purpose for which you were conducting the audit procedure, whether that purpose is solved or not. ठीक है? For example, let's say the auditor wants to know about the valuation of inventory. ठीक है? So purpose is to look at what? Valuation of inventory. Now, if the auditor is performing audit procedure, let's say inspection, that is, he is looking at the inventory, or let's say if he is observing the inventory, कि बस वो he is looking at it, he is not looking at the papers, let's say. So will it solve his purpose? Valuation तो valuer report देख के ही पता चलेगा ना आपको, या the various statements of the financial statement. Or let's say if you are looking at, you want to look at the valuation of the building. तो सिर्फ बिल्डिंग को देखकर इंस्पेक्ट करके तो आपको नहीं पता चलेगा ना क्या वैल्यूएशन है ना. सो दैट इज व्हाई इट इज सेइंग कि क्वालिटी तभी होगी जब वो रेलेवेंट है for the purpose of audit procedure. You were performing that audit procedure. आप क्या कर रहे थे? आप inspection कर रहे थे, physical examination of building. Why? Because you wanted to see the valuation. But valuation physical examination of building से थोड़ी ना पता चलेगा. अगर आप building को देख रहे हो, you will be able to know whether that building exists or not. पर उसका value क्या है? उसके लिए तो documents देखने पड़ेंगे ना. So that is why it says that the audit evidence should be what? Appropriate, which means it should be relevant and it should be reliable. Reliable, I told you what? Able to be trusted. अगर मैनेजमेंट से आपको इंफॉर्मेशन लो, मैनेजमेंट लिख के दे देता है विज़ सिचुएशन जहां थर्ड पार्टी आपको कंफर्मेशन देता है, सो विच वन इज मोर रिलायबल? ऑब्वियसली जो आप थर्ड पार्टी से लेते हो, बिकॉज दैट इज एन इंडिपेंडेंट पार्टी, है ना. दैट इज वाई एक्सटर्नल कंफर्मेशन बहुत रिलायबल होता है. वाई? बिकॉज इट इज ऑब्टेन्ड फ्रॉम एन इंडिपेंडेंट पार्टी, प्रोवाइडेड दैट इंडिपेंडेंट पार्टी इज नॉट अ रिलेटेड पार्टी. करेक्ट. सो व्हाट इज रेलेवेंट? रेलेवेंट if that audit evidence has a logical connection with the purpose of audit procedure. जो आप audit procedures कर रहे हो, जो भी आपका purpose था वो solve हो रहा है या नहीं. In our example, you wanted to look at the valuation of the building. तो merely by inspection, सिर्फ आप ऐसा audit procedure कर रहे हो जिससे आपको existence पता चलेगा, आपको valuation थोड़ी ना पता चलेगा. And reliability is that you are able to trust a document and it depends upon the source and nature. I gave you example of source कि अगर external third party से independent party से है, that is more reliable vis-a-vis a document which is internally generated by the entity. Nature, अगर आपको कोई orally बता देता है कि this is the situation, vis-a-vis कोई writing में आपको कोई document देता है. ऑल्सो नेचर में यू कैन टेक एन एग्जाम्पल कि अगर आपके पास कोई ओरिजिनल डॉक्यूमेंट है विज़ यू हैव फोटोकॉपी, विच वन इज मोर रिलायबल? ऑब्वियसली द ओरिजिनल वन, है ना. तो ये दिस टॉपिक इज वेरी सिंपल एंड हियर ऑल्सो आई वांट टू गिव यू अ होमवर्क. So with respect to relevance and reliability, which we have discussed quite in detail here, so you need to go to paragraph number 2.13, which is given on page number 3.36. Also, there is a topic with respect to nature and source of audit evidence, that which one is more reliable, which is on page number 3.34, types of audit evidence. बहुत simple topic है. Let me just take you through the module. You need to do that as your homework. Student, this time we are having one session less for this chapter. Earlier we used to have 6 sessions. This time we have 5 sessions. So that is why I'm including very few topics as a homework, which are very, very easy. Though I have discussed that with you in the session, but for reading it, I have asked you to read it at home. So this topic, see, types of audit evidence, that depending upon nature, it can be visual, that when you are just inspecting, oral when you are inquiring, documentary when you are getting anything in writing. Depending upon the source, it is internal and external. Internal is which is generated within the entity. External is third party, right? Based on this is very simple topic. You can go through it. Relevance and reliability. So relevancy, it is mentioned logical connection with the purpose of audit procedures, Hana. And reliability depends upon what? The source and nature of audit evidence. Okay? And this also you need to do. See, reliability of audit evidence increases when it is obtained from independent sources. Simple, a third party wala confirmation, if that party is independent, it is more reliable vis-a-vis the information obtained within the entity. It is obtained directly by the auditor. Auditor को direct response अगर मिल रहा है, for example, external confirmation है, auditor is obtaining it directly vis-a-vis a situation where third party is first sending the reply to the client and client is giving it to the auditor, है ना. तो which is one is more reliable? जो auditor directly ले रहा है from the third party. Obtained in documentary form as compared to what? Oral. Obtained in original documents as compared to what? Photocopies. ठीक है. And it says that if any of the audit evidence is internally generated within the entity, so if the controls over that information is good, then the reliability of that audit evidence will increase. बहुत simple है. Please go through it as a homework. ठीक है? So this, that is paragraph number 2.13 and paragraph number 2.12. ठीक है? These are your homeworks. So students are saying, ma'am, हमेशा ऐसे ही class लिया करो. So students, it is my endeavor to make each and everything very easy and simple for all of you, Hana, to understand. So what is meant by appropriateness of audit evidence? It is the measure of quality of audit evidence, that is relevance and reliability in providing support for the conclusions on which auditor's opinion is based. Reliability is further influenced by source and nature of the audit evidence. So what is relevance, what is reliable, what is the source and nature ke based पे types of audit evidence, that I have discussed with you, but I have given this to you as your homework. ठीक है? Sources of audit evidence also we have seen. You can just go through it as a homework. ठीक है? So I'll do one thing. We have completed a number of things in essay 500. Quickly, 2 minutes में we will just recap and then I'll stop the session for today. ठीक है? So we have done till till this with the homeworks with paragraph number 2.13 and 2.12, I suppose. ठीक है? So we did audit evidence essay 500. So we saw that audit evidence is what information used by the auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based, and it includes both the information contained in the accounting records underlying the financial statement and other information. ठीक है? Objective is what? To design and perform audit procedure in such a way to enable the auditor to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Why? To be able to draw reasonable conclusions on which to base the auditor's opinion. ठीक है? Then if the auditor is using the information that is provided by management expert, first he will evaluate the CCO, competence, capability, objectivity of that expert. He'll obtain an understanding of that work of expert and evaluate the appropriateness of that work to be used as audit evidence for the relevant assertion. Assertion क्या होता है? Next session में detail में discuss करेंगे. Agar information is produced by the entity, auditor will obtain an audit evidence with respect to accuracy and completeness of information and evaluate whether information is sufficiently precise, is right or correct. ठीक है? Inconsistency है तो modification, addition audit procedures करो, consider the effect of the matter on other aspects. ठीक है? Sufficiency, ये सब source of audit evidence ही है. Sufficiency is what? Measure of the quantity of audit evidence, and quality is what? Appropriateness. Auditor's judgment with respect to what? The sufficiency of audit evidence is affected by 3 factors: materiality, risk of material misstatement, size and characteristics of population. With respect to appropriateness, topics that will come that you need to read is what? Relating to relevance, reliability of audit evidence, and source and nature of audit evidence. ठीक है? So with this, I will end the discussion for today, and I hope that whatever we have done so far is clear to you, and I need all of you to please send in your replies whether it is clear or not. Okay? So I've told you that this time we have 1 session less for this chapter. Okay? So that is why I've given you some homeworks which we will discuss in the class, but yes, reading part you need to do at your homes. Okay? So I hope it is clear. So thank you for being a patient listener, and study hard, study smart, and start studying from the module, right? So thank you, students. Good night.